All right, guys. So remember, your formulas test is tomorrow. Everybody has a formula packet, right?
Yep.
Okay, if you don't really look over this packet and really know this stuff, it's not going to be a fun day tomorrow. This is not me going, hey, what's the derivative of 5x? Like on the derivative rules, if you go, oh man, I know 8 of those 15, those last 5, well, those are the ones I'm testing you on. Or those integral rules. And by the way, look at the integral rules. Like, look at those. Front page, if you're looking at them, I put a star by 3 of them. You don't have to know those, okay? They require implicit differentiation. I put them on here because a lot of people like to hold on to this packet should they take Cal 2, and it's got all their formulas right there at their fingertips. They don't have to go through all of the books that I've given you. It's just a really nice consolidation of what we've learned in terms of rules and stuff. And it is nice. People ask me for this every year. They email me and ask me, hey, man, can you send me that review packet, blah, blah, blah. And I will send you the PDF if you want it. But the point is, it's nice to have this. But also, somebody was asking, hey, on your derivative rules down there at 14, and I don't know why I went from 14 to 16, having a little issue numbering. But they're like, why didn't you put, maybe it's because I deleted the cosine one, but they're like, why don't you have arc cosine or arc cotangent or any of those other ones? It's because AP in their history has never asked questions about those. If you look at the integration formulas down at 18 and 19, why do you just have the integrals of the ones that end up giving you arctan or arcsecant? Well, it's because AP has only ever asked about those. So I have eliminated, and also somebody asked, hey, how come we don't have to take a derivative of a exponential function? Actually, I put it on there. You see number 12 on the derivative formulas? You don't have to know that. I don't know why it's even on there. AP will not ask you to take a manual derivative of an exponential function unless it's base E. And they won't ask you to do a log of any base other than base E, so just like ln. You have to worry about that. And but anyway, your test tomorrow will be and somebody asked in the other period, they said, will it be more problems or more formulas? The only time I use problems is when it's easier to use a problem. Like I have found that people get more confused when I say, what's the integral of cotangent u du, than when I say something of like cotangent 2x dx. So there might be very basic u substitutions, or like derivatives. Like you see on your derivative formulas, like number 6, the derivative of cosine u is negative sine u times u prime. To me, that's uglier looking than me just saying, hey, what's the derivative of cosine of 5x? So you could just say negative sine of 5x times 5. So in cases like that, sometimes I will put the problem. Like if I'm asking you a question like mean value theorem, know the formula. If I'm asking you a question about, hey, find the equation of a line tangent to the curve at this point, I think it's probably easier for me to ask you to actually do one than to say, hey, what are you going to do? And you to describe the process. So, but for the most part, it is formulas, 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 rules, rules, rules. And then also people got to towards the back where they had this question and answer page. If you've looked at that, those used to be flashcards, and they were like big blocks where people could cut them. Had the answer on the front, question on the front, answer on the back. But I asked one year and people were like, no, we didn't make flashcards out of them. So I was like, why am I wasting paper? So I just kind of shrunk all those up. But those are questions that might be on there too. There are things that are important for the AP test that I definitely want you to know. If you flip past that, things to know about the AP exam. No, I'm not going to ask you a question on the test tomorrow that says something like, how many questions are in section 1, part 2? Or part B. That's not important to me. Or like, what date is your AP test on? That, I don't think, that is not important to me. But me asking you a question like, what mode should your calculator be in? Radian mode, that is important. How many decimal places are we rounding to? 3 decimals, that is important. And some of you are still giving me 2. So those kinds of things, yes. What 4 things do you need to know how to do with your calculator? Everybody with me? So, yeah, those 4 things, you've got to be able to know how to do those and communicate those. Like, what do you need to get a 5? No, I'm not going to ask you that because that varies from year to year, although I want you to have an understanding of that. And also, let me tell you this. Right now, if I were you, and I'm probably speaking for most of you right here, you probably don't really know how you're going to do on this thing. Now, you hear me say things like, I would not surprise me if over half of you made 5s, which would be like a massive record. I mean, it would just be tremendous. And I really do. I've looked down this list and I see 20 people that I'd be willing to bet money on.
Do it.
Individually, that you'd get a 5.
Gamble.
And if you're doing the math on that, you're like 20 out of 35, I like the chances. Okay, so, but that being said, I also know there are people in here a little paranoid about stuff and testing, and you're probably going, oh, I don't know. And when you take that first practice test, which I'm going to hand you the first part of one, and you have all spring break to do it, when you take that first non-calculator practice test and you grade it and you get your points back and you start interpolating that over the whole test, or as each score comes back, then you're going to get an idea about where you stand. Okay, you're going to go, oh, well, I made a 3. Do I have a shot of getting a 5? Yes. Or, oh, I made a 4. Do I have a shot of getting a 5? Or I made a 1. Do I have a shot of passing? Yes. Let me just show you randomly how one particular class, I literally randomly pulled this up. Let me get rid of names. Okay, this was 2016, 2017. Okay, this is 2016, 2017. I used to give an optional practice test, and that was on like April 16th. I usually did it on that snow day. You're starting practice tests in March, okay? So they had already gone through the material a bunch before they ever took that practice test. Yours very likely, because we're doing it so early, your scores may be a little lower than this. But just look from one practice test to my big test, the jump in points that we saw. So literally all they did was actually take a practice test, we went over it, and then they took a big test. And you saw this person went, well, this person didn't take the practice test, made it 2. But even after they went over it, they went from a 2 to a 3, all right, and passed. This person went from a 3 to a 4. Now, on the AP test, for some reason, they actually dropped back down to a 3, but from there to there, they went up a point, and this is the major test that will affect your grade. So they ended up getting a really decent A for that 9 weeks because of that. This person went from a 4 to a 5, a 4 to a 5, a 3 to a 4, and you can look at all of these. Nothing to a 4. This person very well, had they taken extra tests, might have jumped 4 to a 5, 2 to a 3, 5 to a 5, 3 to a 5, 3 to a 4, 3 to a 4. This person actually dropped from a 5 to a 4, but ended up making a 5. On my big test, they dropped a little bit. And this person made a 5 and a 5 without any practice test. No telling how, but look at their averages are pretty strong. 3 to a 5, nothing to a 3, 3 to a 3, 3 to a 4. But they had a class average of a 4. On the AP test, their class average was a 4.14, which was really, really good. But you can see on average, people went up 15.5 points. 15.5 points jumps you at least 1 point, like from a 3 to 4 to 4 to 5 or whatever. That's average. And some of these people didn't take the test, so they didn't log any jump. And some people had really low jumps, some people had really big jumps. And if you look at other classes of mine, like this person had a huge jump. Sometimes you'll see 38-point jumps. And this is from one test to another. You're going to have what do we have? A, B, C. We're going to have 4 practice tests that we take and go over before you take your AP test. They had 2. So if you're actually learning from what you're missing, and the first one I'm not counting, all right, but it's super important for you to learn from it, because when you learn from it, you're jumping a point or more sometimes, all right? And then on the real AP test, well, that's just, who knows what's going to happen on that. Hopefully that'll be good for you. But once we get this first one in the book, so I highly encourage you not to blow this off on this practice test, but to actually do it to the best of your ability. Learn when we go over it, ask good questions, learn from what you missed, all right? And then when we take that first one that's worth 100 points, you're going to see a big jump in your points. But I'd be willing to bet we're going to have decent scores already just on that first practice test. Maybe not as good as this, because this average, do I have it down at the bottom? No, I didn't average that because so many people weren't there to take it. But that average was, hold on. No, that's the big test. So I don't know what the average is going to be for you guys, but I'd be willing to bet it's pretty decent, especially this third period tends to score. We got a little bit of spirit. You guys have a little bit more laziness in my third period in you. It's about 50-50. And you need to pick it up on this because this is where you're going to change everything. You might have been lazy up to this point, just kind of winged it. You get after it right now, everything changes. I mean, really, if you got a C right now, you could have a B for the semester. You have a B right now, most people move a letter grade up on that last 9 weeks because I rarely have people that fail of the big test, right? In this class, I had, 2 people fail the big test? Just 2? And your class is stronger than this class. So that was just 2 people. I would, in this class, honestly, I kid you not, I think this class and the other class, we could have just massive monster scores. You could make me look like a genius this summer. But it's up to you. I mean, I'm going to spoon feed you. I'm going to go over these tests with you. If you want to be good, you'll be good. But there's no reason for anybody to not pass this thing and get college credit, with the exception of being if you went to some school that requires a 5. Like, what does Vandy require? Do you know? Do they require 5? Yeah. And I would totally believe that you would get that. Yeah. Yeah, and you want to clip out this class because Vandy calculus, it's like where you go to die. Yeah.
Have fun.
Yeah, I'm not kidding. Like in Auburn it was always chemistry that they used to weed out all those people that thought they were engineer capable, and they were like, no, you're not, and we're going to do that to you in chemistry. So you don't have to. Well, at Vandy, I'm convinced it's Cal 1 and Cal 2. Dude, I mean, there are kids that made 5s on the BC exam that went over to Vandy and had S and dropped it, and then took it the next semester and eked out a C. I don't know what their deal is with calculus, man. They just want to beat you down. Now, granted, some of those guys might have been on the less disciplined side, even though they were smart enough to get a 5. You are not on the less disciplined side, so I like your chances. But to get rid of one, totally you can do that. But most schools like Auburn, like if you're a business major at Auburn or Alabama, if you're a business major, you need a 3 to clip it. And not only can you get rid of Cal 1, you can get rid of business Cal also. So 7 hours of credit you get at a public university around here for getting a 3. Now, if you're in engineering at Auburn, then you need a 4, I think. Or UAB, I know you need a 4. So if you might pass it but not get credit. You might have to take it again. But I got to be honest with you, if you make a 3, you probably want to take it again. Make sure you're in good shape. But again, I'm looking around at your faces. If you care, you'll pass this thing. If you don't, then it's a coin toss. I had a girl in here, I kid you not, in January, she started reading books in the back of the class. I mean, she's great. I really do like her, still keep up with her. Really fun, but she literally just started reading books. She passed. I mean, there are people out there that are just smart enough to just pass. If you're in physics and you do well in physics and you really understand velocity acceleration, that's huge. I've had kids that made D's for me in this class but passed the AP test because they knew their physics and the physics carried over. So those kind of things might help too. Anybody else on anything on this packet that they want to ask me about or they're curious about and how it relates to the test? Anything?
I have a question.
Yep.
For mean value theorem, this is just like the one that popped in my head. Are we going to need to say like it is continuous on this interval and
yes, but say it as quickly as you can. So like that's a great question. So to answer that, like if I asked you what is your formula for the mean value theorem? Well, the mean value theorem, as we all know, says what? The slope of the function at one value, right, is going to be equal to what? The slope from beginning to end. And the slope from beginning to end would be the y value at the b minus the y value at the a over the x value, the b, minus the x value, the a. So the slope from beginning to end, and the beginning is a, the ending is b, is going to equal the slope of a function somewhere, and sometimes they use c in there, whatever. It's going to at least once. But the condition has to happen. And the conditions are what? It's continuous. Don't say continuous on the word closed. Say it's continuous on the bracketed a to b, differentiable on the open a to b. So yeah, that is important to this. And if that was a 4-point question on my test, it's probably 1 point, 1.2 points.
Can you go over the derivative of inverse functions?
Like how we get them?
Yeah, like can you just do like a problem?
Literally, it would be something like this. Like if I'm doing a, say I said inverse sine, and I might use arc sine, inverse sine of 3x. So your derivative function says it is the derivative of the actual u, right? Because it's inverse sine of u over the square root over 1 minus the u squared. That's literally all you do. And I'm like you, man. I don't use these every day either. I forget them. I can go back and prove them, like if I forgot them, because I know how to do a proof of them, because it's, by rewriting this, y equals inverse sine of 3x. I could rewrite it as the sine of y equals 3x, and then do the derivative implicitly. So I remember how to do that when I forget it. But I'm really hoping you just memorize it, because literally, whether it's inverse sine or arc sine, that's it. And then clean it up, because it's 9x squared. It'll end up being 1 minus 9x squared in the bottom. But that's the extent of it. And usually, they're not going to make these ugly. Like it'll look something like this, because they're purely checking a definition. So if you know it, you're just stealing a point. If you don't, there's not a whole lot of ways to wing it other than just get lucky and guess. Should you guess?
Yes.
Absolutely. You're not penalized for being wrong. So absolutely don't leave anything blank. And I believe the real test goes, by the way, it goes multiple choice, free response, and then the calculator portions are in the middle. But I'm not going to do that with you guys when I start making them count, because I don't have to really grade your multiple choice. That's like a Scantron deal, but I got to grade your free response. So what I'm going to do is go free response. So that'll give me a couple of days to grade them, right? Rather than be miserable one night, because it's really hard to grade free response questions, right? So I'm going to go free response, multiple choice, but that's not how it will happen on your actual test that you take for AP. But I will do that in class when we test in class, just because I want to give myself that time. What else? Anything in this packet you're curious about how I might ask the question, or? Yep.
Can you do the derivative of an inverse function one?
Like that?
No,
Like the inverse, like a.
F prime.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not going to ask you. I see. What page is this on? I remember seeing it today. Okay. Yeah, so let me just make one up here. So let's just say my function is 2x cubed minus x plus 1. And I said find the inverse, the derivative of the inverse of x when, let me make something up here, when x is 2. Okay. Now, if I'd said find the derivative of f when x is 2, you would just take the derivative, right? Plug a 2 in. But I said find the derivative of the inverse of f. Well, in this case, this x value on the inverse is actually the what on the original function? The y value. Because you remember when you did inverses in algebra 2 and algebra 3, all you did was switch x's and y's. So that means this x, I want to put it right here, but I don't know the inverse function. And then you get there and you go, well, what if I were to find the inverse function? To find the inverse, what was your rule? You did what?
Switch the x.
You changed y to x and you changed x to y. So this is my inverse. The problem is, how do I rewrite that as a function? And the short answer is I don't, because I don't know how to solve for y when I have y's like this. So the way to get around it, if you don't want to do implicit differentiation, which when I taught this, we didn't know implicit. The way to get around that is to say, well, if this is now my inverse, if that's the inverse right there, I can plug 2 now in for that. You with me? And I can look at this and go 2 equals 2y cubed minus y plus 1. So I'm kind of eyeballing it and saying, what would y be? And you just start guessing. Is it x equals 0? I mean, is the y 0? Would that make it true? No. Would y equals 1 make it true? Oh yeah, y equals 1 would make it true. So if y is equal to 1, that means to do this inverse, I'm not going to use x equals 2. I'm going to use y equals 1 in my formula. Now, if you look at your formula, it says the derivative of the inverse of x is the same thing as what? 1 over the derivative of the what? The original function of f, but not at 2, at what? At 1. You with me? So all you would have to do is go, well, I could definitely take the derivative of that. That I can do. 6x squared minus 1. So I'm just going to plug a 1 into that derivative function and get 5 all the day. But the idea, this is the thinking behind it. Say this is a function right here. If that's a function, then this is the derivative, right? Because remember, then this is the inverse, right? Because there are reflections about that. Well, that's not a very good reflection, but let's pretend it is, okay? So if this point right here is a comma b, then this point over here is b comma a. This slope right here is a reciprocal of that slope right here. So if that slope is 2, then this slope is a half. And you can kind of see that. That's why I'm flipping it. So the derivative of the inverse at a is the same thing as me flipping it and finding the derivative of the function. Say this is the inverse. This is the function. The derivative of the inverse at a is the same thing as me flipping the function and finding the derivative at b. That's why that number switches, because it switches from the a to the b, and then gets flipped. So that's the thinking on it, but sometimes they'll give you a table with that. I don't know that I'm going to ask a whole lot about that. You will start seeing it on the practice test that we do. Usually there's one a test. And this is a perfect example right now. There are people in here. Everybody with me? Hey, get some sugar. There are people in here right now that are like, they're looking at this right now and they're going, my brain just does not want to absorb this. Listen, you don't have to make 100 to get an A. You don't have to make a 90 to get an A. You have to make a 63% to get an A, right? Normally, when you get back a test and it goes, I just made 63% on that, you're going to like, awesome. Now you make 63%, you're like, sweet, I just made a 5. 5 to me, 105 on that test. And if the test is worth 300 points, it's a 315 out of 300. You make a 5. You make a 4, that's an A on that test. It'll be a sliding A, depending on how good the 4 is. You make a 3, it's a B on that test. It'll be a sliding B. But that's the way I think. And remember, a B is a 40 out of a 108. That's not even in the 40 percentile, right? I mean, that's not even 40% of your points. So you have to rethink it. If there's something that your brain is exploding on, that's okay. You can take a mulligan. Just don't keep taking whatever. Don't keep throwing stuff out there. Well, I can't do that. And related rates, yeah, I'm checking out on that one. And yeah, integration's a problem with me. I'm going to throw that. You can't keep doing that. But at some point, if there are little things that your brain is just not wrapping around, I get it. Cut your losses on those. Focus on what you can. Like if you don't know how to do area and volume, I definitely come see me and figure it out, because area and volume that's a moneymaker, and you're going to be asked 8 or 10 points on that. And it's not that bad once you get it. Once you get it, you're like, man, I love the area and volume. Most people did really well on that. But that's different. Like related rates, not going to show up so much. If you really hate related rates, I kind of like related rates, but if you really hate it, again, that's maybe something where you go, hey, if it's only 3 or 4 points, maybe I cut my losses. And listen, I've mentioned related rates because I know how people feel about related rates sometimes. Most of the time when you see a related rates problem, it's not as hard as what I tested you on. They're usually pretty basic. They're little multiple choice questions, not free response questions. I think 2 years ago, it showed up on a free response for the first time in a decade. But it was still 4 points. It wasn't like it was a make or break thing. But usually it's just a 1.2 point problem, 1.2. Each problem is worth 1.2 points. So that's usually what you're looking at, is a couple of those maybe. What else?
Can you APCalc rule? I know like how to do it. Just like
I only can use it in A/B when you plug this value in, whatever it is you're doing, and you get 0 over 0 or infinity over infinity. So for instance, if I were to be doing something and I got x squared minus 3x minus 4 and x squared minus 16, not that this problem is going to be overwhelming for you, but if I were to do that and plug a 4 in and I go, 0 on the top, 0 on the bottom, that's not my answer, but I can do L'Hopital's rule. Now, you guys know how to factor. Well, what if you don't know how to factor? Now you go L'Hopital's rule. Derivative of the top, derivative of the bottom, redo the limit, 5/8. Cool. So you've got L'Hopital's rule, which is really helpful now when you start seeing stuff like this. And you're like, oh man, trig, man, I forgot my trig rules. Plug in a 0. Not my answer, but I can do L'Hopital's rule. Derivative of tangent of blah, secant squared blah times 4. The derivative of sine of 3x, cosine 3x times 3, right? Redo your limit now. Now remember, when we do limits, we never deal with secants or cosecants or cotangents. So what do I do before I get started? Move that to the bottom. Make it a cosine on the bottom. Now plug in a 0, and what do you get? 4 on the top, 3 times, what's cosine of 0? Cosine of 0 squared. So 4/3. Now I like my rules. And I've got some rules that work, but if you forgot all those, if you get 0 over 0 or infinity over infinity, you can use the L'Hopital's rule. And if you ever take Cal 2, there's a bunch of other rules that also apply to that. They call them indeterminate forms, like 0 to the 0 power or infinity to the infinity power. BC people have to know like 8 or 9 conditions where those are applicable. We only have to know 0 over 0 and infinity over infinity, and typically just 0 over 0.
Are you going to ask us about all the properties of the definite integral?
What page is that?
The 4th, 6th.
Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely. She said the properties of the definite integral, like the integral from a to a of a function. Well, that's always 0 because it's a to a. Same about you start and finishing. There's no area there. The integral from a to b is the same thing as a negative integral from b to a. So if you switch the a and the b, it negates it. Yeah, those properties definitely, I would certainly look over all those. The even and the odd one, definitely.
Would you ask those as like us solving something or just for us to write those out?
I probably ask you, like, is it true? Is it not true? If it's true, if it's false, correct it. Stuff like that, man. Hey, one last thing. Here is the actual test. Your first, if you're not here tomorrow, I wanted you to have it. Here's your part A. It is what you're going to be doing. Don't bother tonight. Focus on your test, but this is in case you're not here. tomorrow for whatever reason. Everybody get one of these.
And then there's another one that's, well, something about those. Thank you. No. Obviously, there.
See you, Mr. Mary.
See you, man. Have a good one.
Sorry.
See ya.
Telling you, I'm gonna ace that course, the test tomorrow.
Sweet. I hope so.